Hi everyone, this is your favorite friend Jay or Jaylan Salah, as you formerly know her, film critic at Geek Vibes Nation and In Session Film. Today I have the pleasure of finally getting my friend and fellow podcaster Megan Kearns, film critic and co-host of the film podcast Spoiler Peace Theater and co-host of the Slashers podcast. Megan has been on our Women in Session Film podcast a lot. Like she's a regular guest and she always has interesting opinions to say. She's so opinionated and awesome, like all my women, how I like all my women. So, Megan, I just want to say I'm so happy to talk to you finally alone here.
I know. Thanks so much, Jalen. I'm so excited to be here and I'm so excited to talk with you too. I always love what you have to say. I always love all of our conversations as a group, but yeah, it's really exciting to talk one on one.
I just adore the first time we talked, I think we talked about vampires, and then we talked again about it. We talked about it ends
Yes.
with yes, right? Exactly. We were talking about vampires, and then we were talking about it
Hmm.
ends with
Hmm.
us and the scandal of, like Blake Lively and Justin Baldoni. Okay, when I forget all about those two. But what I loved about Megan is she always seriously get them, scrub them out of my brain, please. Someone kick them out. So,
It's awful.
right. What I love about Megan is she always has something interesting to say, and she's really opinionated, and she's like a gal's gal. Like she's not
Oh,
afraid of telling what she thinks to the world and putting it out there. And it's so awesome and it's so cool. And I really love listening to more women like that. So, Megan, what do you like about our Women in Session film? Because I feel like this is a coven of really interesting women coming together and talking.
I agree. Okay, I just have to say thank you for your incredibly lovely, kind words. I'm like blushing over here. But I love Women in Session because, like you said, everybody's so opinionated, but everybody's so nice and respectful. And listen, I love my male co-hosts on both of my podcasts, and they're great and they're wonderful. But there's a different camaraderie with women, and it's just so nice. I love it. It's so inspiring. It's enlightening. I feel like I learned so much. I feel like I'm seen, but yet there are so many diverse perspectives and experiences. I just love that we can come together and gush about film and disagree about film and agree. And I love all of it. It's so much fun. And I feel so lucky to be a part of it.
And honestly, shout out to Kristen Baristella who holds this, entity together. Kristen, we
Yes.
love you so much, girl. We always have you on our minds. So vampires, girl. Vampires.
Yes.
Love, hate, adore, infatuated with. It's a secret kink of mine. I'm the vampire. I'm the vampire's lover. Who are you in the vampire verse? Because I'm a lot of things.
Ooh, it's so funny. I think I'm the vampire voyeur because I don't want to be a vampire and I don't want
Okay.
to be with a vampire, but I am very, I don't know if I'd say titillated, but sure, we'll go with it. I'm very intrigued watching vampire stories. And I didn't really think I was, but over and over again, I'm drawn to these stories, whether it's in books, whether it's film, whether it's TV, and part of it, of course, is that there are so many vampire stories and vampires falling in love with women and women falling in love with kind of monsters in general. But yeah, but I love watching and reading these stories. So yeah, I think I'm the vampire voyeur.
Okay, being a vampire myself, it's always interesting to talk to a vampire warrior. Like I would be in the vampire clan, definitely, no questions asked. Ha ha ha. So for for us, I think as women, there's been this way of us drawn to vampire stories for some reason. There is a lot of vampire
Yes.
romances, and there is also a lot of monstrous vampires, like when you see Vampira and stuff like that, and even those amazing pulpy comics with her kind of like hunting
Yes.
at night and having fangs and all these powers. Why do you think vampires have created, at least I think our generation, like such an ingrained part of the culture? At least as romance. Like when you have even Francis Ford Coppola turning Dracula into this, like timely romance. Why do you think it's so romantic
Hmm.
that we as women crave those vampiric stories or even becoming, like vampiric entities to seek a particular type of romance?
Yeah, that's such a great question. I think a lot of it has to do with that there's such a sensuality and sexuality imbued in vampirism. and like it's such a sensual act, like someone, biting someone's neck and being up close, and it's so intimate there. And so I think that's part of it, like that's always kind of been there since the genesis of those stories. But I think with our generations and coming after, I think, definitely Francis Ford Coppola's Bram Stoker's Dracula. I mean, that was such a seminal film for my development, and I know so many others, because it's so crazy, unabashedly so, and so unapologetic, but also so romantic and so sexy. And so that, I think, has a lot to do with it. And I definitely think Twilight, for better for worse, I think Twilight has a huge part of that. I think of like the True Blood books and the TV series. And so I think so many people turn time and time again to these monster stories. And like, I watched Jean Cocteau's Beauty and the Beast recently, and looking at all of the iterations of Beauty and the Beast and all of the iterations of Cinderella, like these stories are told over and over and over again. But I think we keep coming back to vampire stories because there is that illicit allure, there's that sexiness, there's the brooding, monster as the vampire. And I think that's just so enticing. So I think there are a lot of elements at play. And yeah, and especially now with the rise of like romantasy in books, and but prior to that, like gothic literature, like I just think there's so many reasons. But yeah.
Okay, so Twilight, because Twilight, when the first novel came out, I was in college. So this was a seminal part for me. I remember getting a recommendation from one of my friends. She was like a high school friend, and then we went to different unis, and she kind of like recommended, like, you have to read this. And I read the first book, and I had a love-hate relationship with it, but I didn't hate it that much at the time. I was like, okay, that's nice.
Yep,
That's
yep.
not bad. Then New Moon came, and it was a depressive time in my life, and it was a depressive time in my friend's life. So we would always share,
Oh
like
no.
texts. It wasn't that easy texting back in the day. It was like, what, 2007 or whatever. So it was just more difficult than now. But even we would text like, oh my God, I feel so depressed, like Bella and her boring summer, like with Jacob, where she just flings with Jacob and then Edward leaves and blah, blah, blah. And then when Eclipse came, I was like, guys, no, enough. Stephanie Meyer, sorry, you lost me, girl. I feel like I don't need more of this. And then the movies kind of like came, I think, around the time. But my first introduction was the books, so I had to go to see the movies in the movie theater. And I remember even I was excited,
Mhm.
although I was like, no, the casting, but then they grew on me. Didn't have a problem with Kristen Stewart, obviously, but I had a huge problem with ARPADs at the time. I want to know your experience with Twilight. When was it first introduced in your life, and where were you at this time?
So I came late to Twilight, and I have never read the books. I still have never read the books, although I'm somewhat familiar with them. Because I worked at a bookstore around the time. I don't know exactly when I worked at a bookstore, when I don't know if it was the first one coming out or if it was New Moon or Eclipse. I think it was when New Moon came out. But those books were always selling like gangbusters. Like people were always coming in to buy them. People were bananas for them. People were always talking about them. So I kind of knew about Twilight on the periphery, talking to customers, talking to coworkers who read them, and people who loved them, people who didn't love them, and kind of all of that. So I kind of absorbed that just kind of in the ether. And then seeing the films, I didn't go right away because, again, I had no compulsion to see them because I was like, well, I didn't read them. Who cares? But then I did later see the first Twilight, and I was like, oh, this isn't that bad. It's all right. And then, funny enough, I didn't see the second and the third film for a very long time. But I did go to the theater to see Breaking Dawn Part 1 and Part 2. And yeah, that was an interesting experience seeing those in the theater, with crowds who were so voracious for them. So that was my
Exactly.
experience.
Okay, so Bella Swan. I think this character has polarized a lot because I see Kristen Stewart and she's someone I really like and admire. She's always defending her. She's like, no, you can't trash talk Bella. However, as we grew, I
That's right.
think exactly like we kind of grew out of it or at least we outgrew her. Because in the beginning, I was like, okay, she's just a normal girl. And then you started developing, I don't know, like a sense of feminism where you feel like very antagonistic toward Bella. And then you grow older and you start to feel, no, I don't really hate Bella that much. I don't know. That was kind of maybe I hate Edward a little bit because he's kind of annoying and kind of toxic. But also, there's this way of you kind of admiring the
Oh.
toxic relationships again because it's fiction and even in real life. Like, I don't feel like as you grow older, life is not that black and whitish when you assess something. Like, yes, in the beginning, I feel like every single time in my life, in my earlier 20s or something, I would feel like I'm betraying feminism. And then as I grew older, I was like, I mean, fuck it. I don't care. I
Yes.
might like something that is so not truthful to feminism. So I still like this initiation of the relationship that happened. I still like a little bit of it, even the toxicity of it, because I could have been a toxic lover at times. I could have been in a toxic relationship at times. So I want to know your take on. Okay, you never know, man. I could be like a toxic in someone's story. I feel it.
That's true. You could be a villain, hero in somebody's villain in somebody else's, you know?
Exactly.
It's kind of wild to think about that.
So I want to know your take
Yeah,
on Bella,
so
and then yeah, tell
I
me.
oh, there's so much to say. I have to say I love what you said about feeling like you were betraying feminism because so often, like when I started, especially I don't know if you found this, but especially when I started writing and kind of putting my words out in public, I especially felt this responsibility internally that I had to defend feminism and anything that was even remotely problematic. And like I really felt this strong like calling to do so. And I think that that's important. But then, yeah, same as I got older, I was like, well, wait a minute, there are, there's the dialectic where two things can be true simultaneously, and people are complex and things are complex, and it can be, good and bad, or, problematic. And I think Bella kind of encapsulates that. I think a lot of Twilight encapsulates that, but I think especially Bella, because, and I don't know if this is true as someone who has not read the books, but I have heard that Bella was kind of written as like a cipher so people could like put their own spin on her, their own take. But what
100%.
I liked in the films, okay, good. I'm glad I wasn't like way off base on that. But what I liked in the films, and it is, I think, a big part, a testament to Kristen Stewart's great acting abilities and just her persona and who she is as a person. I really liked Bella. And I was like, oh, she's stubborn. Oh, she has agency, even though the men in her life are continually trying to usurp that autonomy and undermine her decision making abilities. And but she knows what she wants, and she's very assertive. She's very sure of herself in the sense that she knows what she wants. So I really appreciate that. I like that she's very open-minded. Like when she meets the vampire family, the Cullens, she's like, yeah, that's okay. I hope they like me. And like that's her big concern. And so she seems like someone, she's friends with Jacob, and like she's someone who seems very compassionate. And so I like her as a character in the films. However, it's her depiction is really problematic in the sense that like she's always klutzy, and like she's constantly falling down, and she's constantly having her life at risk, and not just because the vampires are seeking her, but because of the choices she makes. And even Alice in one of the films makes that comment where she's like, I've never met someone whose life is always at risk the way yours is. And kind of this funny meta commentary. But so yeah, I think there are a lot of things to like about Bella in the films anyway, but a lot of things that are problematic too. So I think she's a complex character, or maybe there's complex reactions to have about her as a character.
What I loved also is what you mentioned. When I go back to my earlier writings in film or even in, like writing about books and literature and stuff, I always like feel very amazed that I was so radical in the beginning. Like, wow, I was just so radical. I was like
Yes.
carrying exactly the weight of feminism on my back because I have to do it for the girls, you know. And because probably also because my
Yep.
community, it's different being, you know, like an Arab woman. So you feel even more responsible because everything around you in the culture is trying to make you to, you know, subdue or accept something. Like even I was just telling a friend that I learned cooking when I was 35 and discovered, wow, I love cooking. But if you had told me in my 20s you would cook someday, I would be at your throat because no, because you expect this of us, you expect this of women. But I really realized this is something that I really want to do for the rest of my life. I just enjoy the act of cooking. So in the beginning, I was so anti anything remotely that made me realize I'm being, you know, like hurt or just, you know, like put down or tied down by restrictions, blah, blah, blah. I have to be faithful to the goddesses of feminism. Now I feel like, no, I'm rebelling even against you. I have my own mind and I know what I
Mhm.
like and what I don't like. And maybe some of it is something that you might criticize me for. But what I love about Kristen's depiction of Bella or portrayal of Bella is the way that she takes her and turns her into not that kind of like meek, weak character. Like she really wants to have sex with Edward and she keeps constantly asking for it. And she
Yes.
uses him like, no, I'm protecting you from me. Like, stop this crap. Cut this crap. I'm horny. Do me. So I really, that's baby, I don't want to. I don't want to do this. I don't want to turn you like fuck it. Just I'm horny, man. Come on, get it. So this is something to just love about her and to just admire about her so much.
Mhm.
And I don't know. I haven't read Breaking Dawn. I don't
Totally.
know if it was that explicit in the books or not, or if it was something that Kristen worked on. But then you start to admire the way that sometimes the film takes something that you dislike in a book and turn it into a better, multifaceted, more complex character. I feel like the desire to be because now there's a lot of even tweets, a lot of social media posts where it's like the desire to be saved by the prince, the desire to be taken by the vampire into his castle. And we have seen this in Nosferatu, for example, where she's like totally the lover of the toxic man. And
Mhm.
she's kind of like giving into the darkness, but she's not a damsel as much as she's as dark as him, but she cannot be as bad as him. Like, this is how I saw it in my mind. So maybe Bella was that kind of person. She was also this
Mhm.
toxic ready to be a vampire, but she was just waiting for someone to give her like the first bite, for example. And this is why I felt
Ooh.
this is what I feel. Like she's always been this dark, toxic girl. She rejected kind of maybe her physical limitations or limitations of her small life. She was just waiting for the first step to let her
Mhm.
enter the darkness. And what step except a man who he would be like, oh yeah, I'm taking you in. But she's actually using him as a bridge to enter the darkness. How would she enter it on her own? She'd be eaten. She needs a guide, a mentor. So when I see it that way, sometimes I feel like, well, maybe there is a little bit of depth to that. I don't know if Stephanie Meyer thought of that as much as we did, but this is how I philosophized it.
Mm-mm.
Especially exactly, she was like, no, she's a small town girl who just needs to be bitten. But so so definitely
Ugh.
Nosferatu kind of like opened my eyes to the idea because I think Nosferatu and Baby Girl were two complementary pieces where it's like the idea that a woman needs to be devoured, but she is choosing the act of the devouring itself. And she's
Yes.
picking the guy to devour her, like, ah, you, not you, sorry. So that made me realize, well, maybe Bella was at least maybe Kristen kind of played her that way. She was like this repressed Mormon woman who wanted to go, or the writer was at least, she wanted to have her desires fulfilled and become a different person, and she needed a vessel for that. So yeah,
Mm.
let's bring in Edward and his clan of vamps to do this job for me. So this made it a little bit more complex than seeing her as, you know, like, ah, not another damsel, you idiots. Ow, I hate that much. Blah, blah, blah. But okay,
Mhm.
so the idea of the werewolf and the vampire, and the idea of this, I think, eternal struggle between werewolves and vampires, and which side do you lean in? What do you think is the appeal of not even, I'm not going to say having a woman at the center of this, you know, like fight, but the idea of werewolf versus vampire? What do you think? Is it low class versus first class capitalism versus working class horror? I don't
Oh.
know.
Ooh. Ooh. It certainly could be. Um, it's it's really interesting. I in preparation inspiration to talk about this. I'd seen her work before, but I watched Ali Nadi, who has eviscerated Twilight and has really deconstructed it from an indigenous perspective and talked about how um, the Quaaludes are depicted in a really racist way and how the werewolves are like there's a lot of racist language talking about them. And so you could say that it's kind of and like how like the vampires are pale even though there's a diverse group of vampires in Twilight films and the books too, that they're elite and that their pinnacle is paler and they're cold and they're stone and that the werewolves are warm and furry and they're both savage but in different ways, like, so it could be in a in that way, it could be in a class way, it could be racially. I'm not sure when we're talking about Twilight, because I feel like you can think of it in a couple different ways. But if we're talking about taking that out for a moment, if we're talking about werewolves versus vampires, because the first time I saw that personally was in the Underworld series, and which, oh my God, that series, I loved that series when I was younger. But anyway, but so I don't know, maybe it's the fact or the appeal of multiple kinds of monsters vying for what, because I know you said we're not talking about vying for a woman, but I feel like there always is like a human woman at the center of so many of these stories. And so maybe it's a different kind of monster,
Yeah.
and but they all want this one woman who's special, and like it does not matter what kind of man they are or what kind of monster, but they all want her. And I don't know, there's something very enticing and very appealing about being so desired,
I was gonna
so
tell you.
pursued, so hungered,
100%.
and yeah, and just that commitment to it. And so it's not just Edward who wants Bella, it's Jacob too, and they're both different and they look different and they have different lifestyles and they have different backgrounds, but they both are pursuing her so intensely and with such focus. And there is something really appealing about that.
And I feel like there's something empowering about being desired that I feel like some of the radical feminist writings that I've been reading in the beginning of my life weren't tackling. This is why it felt like I need to rebel against you. Like this.
Yes.
Yes,
Mhm.
exactly. Because I kind of need this idea, and it feels so good to be at the center of, like a conflict, but also be a catalyst. You're not inert, you're not an inert thing, you're not an inert object. You're kind of like fueling, and you're also kind of like holding the threads of
Right.
this fight because of the power that you have, and sexuality is a power. And this is something that you learn later on as you go on in life, whether it's
Yes.
used for bad and good, it's kind of like superpowers in a way. So Bella had that power, and she kind of like was even, I think, at least this is how I also see it. She was kind of like weighing down which side am I going to be on, but which side is the winner? Like, which side do I want to belong to in a way? And that's kind of cunning and kind of
Yes.
manipulative
Yes.
of her, because I think also there's something that you don't learn except later on in how sometimes you could be like the sub in the relationship, but also kind of like controlling, like internally controlling. And when you hear like kind of these terms like a very submissive dom or like a dominant, like there's even in these
Yes.
terms, exactly, it feels like very empowering to kind of like have an ultra identity to an already established identity, which is great. And I feel like Bella kind of encompasses that. However, Edward Cullen, our Pats, what is your stance with this vampiric glittery bow?
Okay. So I love Robert Pattinson. Like love. Like I think he is such a versatile actor.
Hmm.
I just adore him in anything and everything. I love his range. I love how committed he is in every single performance I've ever seen him in.
Girl.
I
Mhm.
actually love him as Edward. I love him. Now if we're talking about attraction level, I think he's a very conventionally attractive man. I'm not attracted to him, but he is an attractive man. But so as I'm watching him as Edward, I get the allure. I get the appeal. I get the allure of Robert Pattinson as a sex symbol. I get the appeal of Edward as a character, an object of lust and desire for girls and for women. I get it. I'm also watching and I'm like, "Oh my god, this guy is so toxic. He's the worst. He is so terrible. He is so controlling. He is so manipulative. He just vacillates and like gaslights her." And it was driving me up a wall. I was so enraged. But then I'm also like, "Oh, but isn't he nice? He's so committed to
And
her.
isn't that
Isn't that so
sexy?
romantic?" And I'm like, "Oh my god." Like the fact, yes. And I'm like, the fact that I'm vacillating myself between like, "Oh, that's so swoon worthy," but oh, what a jerk. And like, just like, back and forth, like a tennis match. It was ridiculous. But yeah, but I get the appeal. I get the allure, and he's has a lot of swagger in these films, especially the first film, especially. But yeah, no, but I love him as an actor, and I do love him as Edward. I think he's great.
I think also the idea of putting him against Taylor Lautner as Jacob, it's the idea of, I think, the two polar opposites of the desire that you have.
Yes.
The refined, kind of like wine tasting desire, and then just
Yes.
going to the woods with my lover and kind of like getting it off without clothes on. So I think, yes, as you say, it could be, of course, problematic racially, but when we're talking from another standpoint, hopefully not disturbing anyone, it's the idea of what do you want to do? Do you want to like live in the woods and be like wild and free, or do you want no like to be belong to this society where you can have yeah sexuality, but it's not that overt in the way that you are seeking it. Also, the idea
Right.
that Edward is kind of like suppressing his desires and kind of like holding himself, while Jacob is like being his Jacob self, where he's like this
Yep.
wolf, this kind of like uncontrollable beast. So it will always be this and that, like the yin and yang inside a woman's heart. I don't see them also as like separate male identities, but more like parts of her that she craves or she wants to pursue. Okay, so for me, what I see is that they are parts of her. They're not like separate male identities, but more of like parts of her that coexist outside her,
Yes.
pulling her and pushing her in different directions. Which person are you going to be, Bella? It's not about belonging to a man, but more like, who do you want to be, Bella? Do you want to be this girl out in the woods where you see all these women like, yeah, one day I'm just gonna pack and go in the woods and become a wolf or something? Or do you want to be like belonging to this where it's all, I think it's all memeable. I feel like they started these memes of the girls who are like on Tumblr, on Twitter, kind of like depicting their desires as snippets or as, like what Photoshop pictures. Or
I love that.
and
It's
then
amazing.
thanks, babe. And then you have like Edward, do you want to live, do I want to live like, like I have a daddy or I have someone who's like paying for all the things that I really need and using him for sex and for luxury. So it's kind of like Bella split in
Yep.
halves. So your take, okay, on I know you love Arpads. I don't hate Arpads. I think Arpads is great and his career choices are excellent. And I also think he
Mhm.
fits Edward. Like when you read Edward, emo,
Yeah.
somber, blah, 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 exactly, he just fits. Who else would you have glitter in front of a girl and not feel like, okay, do you have
Oh my
another?
god. Yeah, he's the best at glittering and being emo and broody. Yeah. He's the best at it.
What is your take on Taylor Lautner as Jacob? Because some of my friends, okay,
Oh.
in the beginning, we were like, okay, Edward. And then we watched New Moon, and some of my female friends, I remember, went crazy over the guy. Like, I know he didn't have a career later on, but seriously, there were girls like in the movie theater doing like the best moaning voices you could ever listen to in your life. Just watching him take his shirt off.
Um, yeah, I mean, he especially in the second film, he has an incredible body. I mean, the work he did, kudos to him. Um, I think again, I'm not attracted to him personally, but I think he is a very attractive man, um, and with an incredible body. As soon as he opens his mouth, though, I'm like, nope, nope,
Yeah, yeah,
no,
just
thank you.
statue,
So
honey. Yeah, exactly. Shut up,
yeah,
honey. Yeah, yeah. You're good
yeah,
as a model.
yeah,
Just don't open
yeah,
that
just
fangs
yes,
down.
exactly. Yeah, like maybe
Stitch
take your
that
shirt
gape.
off and
Yeah, and do the dance for me,
yeah,
baby,
like
but
chop
don't
some
talk.
wood. Yeah, right, right.
Right,
I know, but
honey? Yeah.
yeah. But at first I was like, but I was like, okay, let's think about this character, Jacob. And I was like, oh, they're friends. How nice. He's supportive of her. But then he becomes gross too and is just as controlling as Edward. And then he becomes even more controlling than Edward. And it's just like, and then he forces himself on her and kissing. And I'm like, ew, this is all just gross. So he
Worst.
becomes gross too, personality wise. So yeah, so I prefer, if we're talking about who I prefer Edward. But if we're talking about bodies, I prefer Taylor Lautner. But if we're talking about, do I prefer the brooding, I've got to suppress myself. No, I can't let it out.
Can't kiss you,
Or,
baby. Yeah.
like just right, right. Or just the, like, let's do this, let's do the deed right now. I would take, Edward, not Edward. I would take Jacob over that.
Exactly.
So yeah, so I think each of them have like better traits than the other, depending on what we're looking at.
I think like Edward
But
is
yeah,
the
Taylor
husband.
Lautner, no.
Edward is the husband, and
Yeah.
kind of like Jacob can be the lover. Like, yeah, honey, pay for the expenses, and you, yeah, I'm free Thursday. Are you there? And then, no, 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 honey, you can go home now. Husband
I
is
know. Well,
back with
also
business
Edward is like
associates.
right? He's also like 150 years old, whereas, Jacob is her age. They're like age appropriate. So, yeah.
Exactly. So
So
the
get
other
down and
creepy
dirty with
old
him.
guy. And this is something also that I feel is just very weird. Like we always complain about daddy relationships, and then you see Edward and you're like, oh, but he's like 100 years old stalking this young girl. You're like,
Yeah.
okay, I still like him.
Right? Because they look age appropriate. So it's like,
Exactly.
ah.
And then it turned into like a chicken, like they're pitting their heads against each other, like Edward and Jacob. And this is when I felt like, ugh, girl, just
Yeah.
let them have it and just go away, have some fun, become a vampire and raise your daughter or whatever. Because it was like, this was the
Right.
moments of cringe for me when it's like turns into men kind of like, oh yeah, going against each other. And she's like, just bored, like just go. And like, no, Edward, don't do this because of Jacob. No, Jacob, don't do this because girl, stop. Just
Uh,
let them do it. Let them get it in the mud and get dirty, and you just go and have fun, like in the library or whatever.
right?
Just
Yeah. There you go. Yeah. Let them like wrestle it out or whatever they're gonna do. Maybe they'll kiss. Who knows? Get it
exactly. Maybe they're like so
you
horny
know,
for each
all
other, and
their
this is why they're
emotions
like,
out.
yes,
Right?
yes,
Who
this is what I
knows?
felt too. But because
Who
of course
knows?
Stephanie Meyer is like
Yeah,
very,
who knows?
she didn't give it liberty. She didn't give it like the given the complexity of desire itself.
Right. Right. Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. But I will say I do love a love triangle against my own better judgment. But I do. I find a love triangle appealing. Not this love triangle though. And not the like you said, the butting heads, the back and forth, and Bella constantly is in the middle refereeing them. It's
The
demeaning.
idea,
It's beneath her. And it's just
exactly.
it's it's boring. Yeah. It's
It's the
just
idea of the
okay, maybe
desiring.
once, but not repeatedly. And it just happens so often. It's
Exactly. I think the idea of the love
yeah.
triangle itself is appealing in the way that you
Mhm.
could be that much desired, or the desire is kind of like
Yes.
expanded. So it's like two people, more people, where I feel like I'm
Yes.
being kind of like torn between that part of me that needs this, that part of me, my heart says yes, my body says no, blah, blah, blah. So definitely, I love that appeal.
Yes.
But do you think it deserved the backlash that it got in the past, or were now the readings much more open to understanding like more layers? Like, is it because Stephanie Meyer herself is kind of like this annoying personality behind the book, or was it people were more radical back then? Like, how do you read the scene?
That is such a great question. I think because I think there are a lot of very valid criticisms, like talking about the sexism and misogyny
And
and the
race is
glorification and
good.
romanticization of abuse dynamics and the race and the racism and the depiction of indigenous peoples. Like, I think there are so many valid criticisms. However, it feels like the loudest contingency that was denouncing Twilight were not any of the people with the valid criticisms. It were people who were discrediting this because it was stupid or fluffy or a romance or girls liked it. And so often, whatever has a fan base that is, whether it's true or not, whether a fan base that is appears to be predominantly women and girls always gets denounced, always gets diminished, always gets demeaned. And it's infuriating because as women and girls, it's like we're not allowed to like anything unless it's approved by men, which is just so stupid. So that really, that the whole discourse around Twilight, I felt like I was defending even before I ever saw the movies, even though I've never read the books, because I'm like, let girls and women like what they like. Who cares? What do you care? And so it's just, uh, it's infuriating.
I feel like also there is a bit of policing of women's tastes and women's writing and kind of like
Yes.
placing it as a lesser, like type of fiction. Like it's not high art.
Yes.
Ladies, because you're writing about love, although, when you think about it, the idea that something has that power and has that grabbing power, I'm sorry, why is it less than, like all the stupid comics movies which you guys see, or the Fast and Furious whatever franchise, which I'm sorry is so dumb and kind of lowers your IQ, just people kind of like doing it with cars. Like, how many
So
are you gonna
dumb.
watch? Exactly. Like, that's a lot of shit. So, why is this less than this? Like, if you want to place it as popular fiction and kind of fun, just place them both in the same category. But
Mhm.
no, let's shit on women and say that their tastes suck and all the things that they write about suck. And I feel like this too kind of like impacted me as a writer because when I wrote my novels, I was like, I'm never going to write a romance because I will be labeled. And then I realized I had a very
Yep.
intense kind of like relationship in my life where I wanted to express it as a novel, an Arabic novel. Unfortunately, that didn't get translated. I realized, well, I want to write exactly because who's gonna read? So I was like, well, I
I
want
was like,
to.
I want to read this book.
Girl, don't get me started. I mean, I wish someday, if it's translated, definitely send Megan first copy. Let's see what Megan says
Yes, then send
about
me.
it. Yes. But I realized, well, I want to write a romance. I want to write a romance, and I want to write it as wild and kind of like back and forth and kind of like me, but it has love and it has all the elements of love and it has things and it has triangles and it has all kinds of weird things about desire and the complexity of it. So the idea of censorship and the idea of bullying that women undergo for daring to like or to write a romance, I think back then was even the loudest voices because the bros were so intense and so against, and they really knew how to put a woman down, regardless of how this whole thing started or the validity of it. But still, I'm sorry, I still see the films as no better, I mean, no less than something like the Fast franchise, because why? I'm sorry, I don't
Oh
see
God, no.
because
Yeah, no, no, no.
exactly like why is this better? Like why is a stupid, like action movie franchise better than a romance fantasy franchise? What is it? There's still brainless nothing. There's still the same tropes, the same things that you put to attract your audience, and you have things that will be present here and there. So, and like it or not, it kind of like impacted popular culture too, because after Twilight, I think,
Oh, absolutely.
how do you see vampire fiction or art changing after Twilight?
Oh, are you asking me that
Yeah,
question?
baby. Yeah, I'm asking
Oh
you.
my God, that is a daunting question. Oh my God. I know that is a great question though, and I'm still absorbing everything you said because I so agree. The
Yes, tell me if you want to
way,
comment
oh
too.
my God, yeah, just the way women writers and the way certain genres that women gravitate towards, whether it's romance, whether it's fantasy, romantasy, whether it's true crime, whatever it is, just the oh, yes, why it's always seen as lesser, and the fact that you said about love being seen as lesser, even though it is such a powerful emotion and such a catalyzing emotion, is just absurd. It's ridiculous. Um, but yeah, back to your question about how did it change? I think there are so many steps along the way in how it impacted culture. But it's funny, I'm thinking about right now how it impacted. I mean, one of it ways was, of course, like YA and the huge fueling of YA along with Hunger Games. and all of the YA movies. But I also think now there is such a push for romantasy, and there are so many series, like whether it's ACOTAR, whether it's Fourth Wing, and how huge those series are and the vociferous followings they have, even though they're not vampire novels, they have certain elements in them, and how those are going to be adapted into a series. And so, yeah, I think that has changed. I think Twilight has changed the culture that way. I think when we're talking about vampires, I think weirdly enough, I don't know, and I'd have to do about this and maybe more research, but I have a weird suspicion that I don't know if Nosferatu, this Nosferatu, the 2024 Nosferatu, would have happened without Twilight. And I know that sounds crazy, but there are so many other vampire films that came before, like obviously, the original, and obviously um Bram Stoker's Dracula by Francis Ford Coppola that we've
And
talked
there's
about.
also the Werner
But I
Herzog's
think
one. Yeah.
Twilight had a part to play too.
Yeah.
Yes, yes. There's so many.
But
And
still, you're right. Yes.
but I
Continue
think
with this thought. Mhm.
the notion of I notion of the romance of it, yeah, I has had such a huge impact.
100%. I think because it's the predatory aspect of this Nosferatu is more connected to the idea of Edward and Bella more than I ever
Yes.
think. It's the idea of the monster within that you kind of call out in the
Yes.
middle of your boring, lustless life, and then this monster enters your life, and you're like, "What the fuck? Okay, I it didn't. This was more than I bargained for." Oops. Are you here? Go back. I was just
I'm in.
joking.
I'm all in.
And so she was like, this poor girl is like, please come here, my angel of death. So he's standing right in front of her, and she's like, wait a minute. Okay. So and then she realizes that he's like telling her, you call on to me because you're like me. You're just needing, like, you kind of like need to give into the darkness like me. So why is this not
Yeah.
familiar to Bella and Edward? Probably because Edward was like emo, was like, no, Bella, I don't want you to be like me. But Count Orlok, of course, because he's like an evil son of a bitch, he's like, hey, you're like me, woman. So definitely this is the
Yeah,
difference.
yeah.
But let's think about it. It
Right?
definitely, I don't think it would have had that success and that depth of analysis and that depth of like seeing beyond like the spooky scary stuff if it weren't for Twilight. I totally agree with your take. Such a fresh take, seriously. And it's different even from the earlier Nosferatus when you think about it, when you compare
Oh,
it.
good. I thought I might be way out there.
No, no, honestly, no. I see the
Yes.
vision. I totally see it. I because I mean, when you strip things off, what makes them sometimes kind of very fitting to their times, like Twilight was kind of like held down by the times I think it was written on, you would see the depth of it, and this
Yeah.
is what it wants to say, but like way holding it back, Edward style. However, now it's a different way. We can say whatever we want and we say it explicitly. So yeah, you have Count Orlok coming for the girl.
Yes.
So even I remember writing on Letterboxd like, oh my God, so they're like two Nosferatus. Okay, awesome. This is what made me like the film. Like seriously, is this what comes down to it? She's like a Nosferatu. Like okay, I'm buying it. If it was another vampire story and he's stalking her and you're like, okay, yeah, blah blah blah, or even something as beautiful and poetic
Like
as like
whatever.
exactly as Bram Stoker's Dracula, where she's like Mina, she's like beautiful and sensual and delicate, and he's like, oh, I'm the Count. You would feel like, okay, seen this, done that. But here, he's telling her, you fragile soul, you girl, always going to mental asylums and locked up, and people not knowing what to do is you. You are as evil as me, but you're kind of like trying to keep that darkness within. So and when I
Right.
see Bella and how she really wanted to be that vampire, she really wanted to go through the transformation process, wanted to have sex with Edward and carry his child. This is what she wanted to be. She wanted to be this vicious, kind of like animalistic creature, no matter what. Kristen Stewart, watch our video. You're
Hmm.
saying valid things here, girl. I'm telling you. You're gonna love this. So exactly. I think this is what she's like really into the other side of Bella that a lot of people cannot grasp or do not see as fully as she does. So yes, vampirism.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it's so interesting because we are as men supposed to follow so many shoulds, and we you said earlier something about being policed, and women's bodies are policed. You said our tastes are policed. They absolutely are. Our decisions are policed. We're always too much, too this, not enough that. And there's something extremely freeing about embracing that, stereotypical darkness or that dark side or that, uninhibited side. And there's a rage that you can connect to with that. There's a freedom in that. And I think you're right. I think that is a part of Bella too, even if it's not articulated maybe the way it intended to be. I think it is. I think it's there. And because like even in the films, like after she's when she's pregnant and she seems to have like no problem, like, oh, I've got to drink some blood. Okay, baby, okay. And like she's totally fine. And as soon as she has to go hunt, totally fine. And so I think you're right. Yeah, there is something really liberating and freeing about that darkness, and yeah, and connecting with it and commingling with it.
Okay. But do you feel like this vampire storyline was more interesting than the werewolf storyline? Do you think that even, let's analyze Tiffany Mayer or the films, do you think she handled this one with much more depth than she did with the werewolves, where it was more of, I think, a way of looking down at a particular trope or a particular subgroup, or at least even at the idea, her dealing with, let's say, the animal within or the savagely or the savagery fully explored and exploded. What do you think? Because I feel this. I can't say this about the
Yeah,
werewolf storyline.
yeah, it's interesting. It seems like there's more diversity in amongst the vampires than there is amongst the werewolves. And so because and I don't just mean diversity as far as race, I mean diversity in that different acts and different attitudes and different traditions. Yeah, it really feels that the werewolf side of the story got shortchanged when you compare it to the vampire. So much so that it's almost surprising to me that there was a vampire or a werewolf, you know, secondary characters and kind of subplot in there. I wish that had been fleshed out more. Um, yeah, because it does. It feels, and I don't know, maybe it's because I'm drawn to vampire stories more too that I found that kind of the vampires more interesting. But yeah, I think also because werewolf stories, not always, but so often, and even here too in Twilight, but so often they're connected to like puberty and like I think of Snaps and I think of like Teen Wolf and like that's happening here too with Jacob, but I feel like they don't really go anywhere with it. Like it's like, okay, there's an alpha wolf and okay, we change, we
And
cut
the
our
pack,
hair, we
blah,
get
blah, blah.
tattoos, and then that's
Exactly.
it. Yeah, and it's like plaque, and I'm like, I don't care about the pack, which is interesting because you have Edward who can read thoughts, you have Alice who can, has visions, prophetic visions, and yet everybody still has their autonomy. But it feels weird, like the depiction of the wolves. It's like the werewolves have autonomy, or that's not encouraged. So I really, if we're talking about the vampire is the vampire portion compared to the werewolf, I really prefer the vampire story. Yeah, I think there's a lot of issues with the werewolf side of the story.
I'm feeling too that the werewolf side of womanhood hasn't been fully explored. I feel like it's always a male story. It's always a male story.
Oh my god.
Girl. I mean, even the
Do you
movies
mean
that,
here in Twilight or in general?
generally speaking, give me the movie where it's a werewolf woman and we're seeing it in a very, like, let's say Mike Lee's Wolf, starring Jack Nicholson, which is high art for me, talking about werewolves. It has Jack Nicholson, it has James Spader, it has Michelle Pfeiffer. Do you see? I feel it's like high art talking about werewolves.
Mhm.
This is like classy movie. I'm sorry, guys, it's not just about fear. Do you have something similar for a woman to undergo the wolf inside her? I don't feel it. Even all these the things you mentioned, an American Werewolf in Paris, American Werewolf in London, all these things, it's always the male story. There was this slightly unsuccessful, it was called Blood and Chocolate. It was about female werewolf, but it was so bad. I read
Oh,
the
yep,
book
yep.
and fell in love with it, but I saw the movie and I hated myself and I hated all of them. So why would they do this? I feel like this is something that needs to be explored from a female perspective because there are, when you read about Native American culture and when you read about things about spirit animals and women being more wolf than woman and the woman seeking the wolf, it's not just about the Red Riding Hood aspect of it, where it's like you're seeking the male wolf. No, no, no.
Right.
It's like seeking the wolf within and this savage kind of like wild fury
Mhm.
part inside the woman. So have you ever read or watched something werewolfy where it was like, ooh, this female protagonist, yes. Growth and claws, girl.
Yes. Yes, Ginger Snaps is probably the most
Yes!
seminal.
Yes, yes, yes.
Yeah,
And it
and
took it
then there's
also from a puberty
also
angle.
yes,
Again,
exactly, yeah.
defining your
Um,
sexuality and stuff.
totally. There's also Good Manners,
Haven't seen this one.
which that came out a few years ago, and I wanna say it's a Brazilian horror film. I can't remember exactly where it's from, but it is an international horror film, and it's a female werewolf, a queer female werewolf too, love story. And then there's also My Animal, which is also a queer werewolf like love story. So there are, which is another indie horror film that came out a couple years ago. So, but there are not many, not many. Not when we compare it to the number of werewolf films with men. And it is interesting too because there's the one werewolf character in Twilight who is a woman, and but I was we barely know anything about her. And what we do know, everybody talks badly about her, and I'm like, well, I want to know more about her.
Exactly. Get rid of the men and let's focus on her.
Yeah,
Tell us
yeah,
what
the
she
men are
is.
jerks. I want to focus on her.
Exactly.
Exactly.
So they kind of like shove her aside, like, no, you're not allowed agency, you're not allowed a storyline, a proper storyline for you to grow. So that kind of pisses me off. When you just mentioned all
Yes.
these great movies, I remember Ginger Snaps, I watched it, but I didn't watch the other ones that you mentioned. Now I had to add them to my watch list. They're not taking center stage. They're kind of like, it's more about
Right.
indie filmmaking. But when you talk
Yes.
about
Yes.
werewolf films that are like center and upfront, always the guy, always male stories. And
Always.
also, I
Yep.
love that they're also Ginger Snaps, argue or not, it's kind of queer coded in a way. And then you have the other
Oh
ones,
yeah.
they're 100% queer. So, what is it about lesbianism and werewolfism that you think is just appealing? Because I feel this is so exciting. I never noticed that, but then I like it.
Yeah.
I agree.
I know. Although it's interesting because when you think about women vampires, a lot of times they're queer too. Not always, of course, not in the same way as the women werewolves, but I don't know. Maybe, I don't know, maybe it's a metaphor for being uninhibited and not conforming to conventional heteropatriarchal, heteronormative
Yes.
standards.
This is why it's more difficult, I think, to write about or depict in films.
Yeah.
Because you don't have a lot of people writing about it from that. And hey, please, someone does this for us, for our, because I really need
We
to
always
see.
need more.
Yes, I feel like there will always be a vampire story, and it will always be. Now you can see it from all kinds of angles. Like we've had great female
Hmm.
vampires too, but I really need that werewolf story that's talking from the angle of the woman. Just see how far we've gone with going beyond the obvious, which is usually, like a rites of passage, puberty, finding sexuality, blah blah blah, whatever. I just need something that is more mature for my taste.
Right. Yeah.
All right.
There was also the Amy Adams one where she turns into the dog.
This one for okay, don't get me started. I'm gonna talk about it because I can't stand it. Okay, like I hated that it was goofy. I didn't want it to
Oh,
be
I
that
didn't
way.
like it at all. I hated it too.
It's
No, I want it to
she's.
be scary. I want it to be intense.
This is what I thought, and I was like, "Girl." Okay, and then I watched the trailer. I remember my disappointment. Like, okay, and people are like, "It's not
Oh,
what you think." I'm like, "Okay, goodbye. Not interested. Thank you
no,
very
it was exactly what I thought, and it was no good. And it could have been and should have been. I was mad.
much."
Yeah. But
Exactly.
you know what's funny? You know what's so funny? This is not a werewolf movie at all. But what I kept thinking about was Julia Ducournau's film Raw, which is a cannibal film. But
I
yet
love this
that
film
has,
so much.
isn't it amazing? Oh my God, I love it so much. But it has a
Best
lot
film
of
about cannibalism.
similarities.
Yes, it's
Yeah,
about finding like the animal with it
absolutely.
and the idea that you're suppressing something that is part of you. And when it goes unhinged,
Yes.
you're just like, and the way she's even giving you the gross factor and the gore, she doesn't hold
Oh,
back. Julie
no, I
Ducournau
love
is
it.
insane. I can't wait to see her new film. Like I saw Titan, I
Oh, I
saw
know.
Raw, but I loved
Yep.
Raw more. But I really can't wait for the third one. I'm like, girl,
Oh,
okay.
Alpha. Oh my God, I know. I know. I
I'm
know. I
going
just saw the
crazy.
first image that's for its premiere at Cannes, and I'm like, I can't wait. I'm like, oh my God, I need it. Inject it into my veins now. I love her so much.
I adore her. Such
She's
admiration
the
for her.
best.
She's the best girl.
Ah,
Okay. Megan, would you
yes.
recommend Twilight to people you're like, let's say you have this podcast where you recommend movies to people. Would you recommend
Mhm.
them the saga? And why would you recommend them?
That is an excellent question, and it's one I've been grappling with because I think there are a lot of good elements. And I love a love story. I love a love triangle. I love a protagonist, a girl or woman protagonist with agency. And like I said, even though people keep constantly trying to undermine her agency, she perseveres and knows what she wants, for better or worse. Um, and I think you have to watch this. I think you have to because it was such a seminal film in this fantasy romance, genre and at that time. I think in order to understand the vampire genre, the werewolf genre, YA film, like I think you need to see it. However, is it wildly problematic? Yes. So I feel like you need to read a lot of diverse perspectives, you need to listen to a lot of diverse perspectives and commentary on this and but I think you need to see it. I don't know if you'll enjoy it, but you need to see it.
Exactly, exactly. It's a defining part of the pop culture. So just watch
Yes.
it, go with an open mind, and then come back and have your questions and have your analysis, and just watch it. I totally agree with that take. Okay, so before anything, what are your eyes on regarding film this year? Like, what are the films that you are most anticipating?
Oh, Alpha, which we
Yeah.
just talked about. This is not out yet, but I saw it at Sundance earlier this year, and it's supposed to come out later this year. Sorry, Baby, which is my number one film of the year so far. It's incredible. Um, yeah, oh my God. Do you want me to tell you what it's about just briefly or?
Yes, please.
Okay. It's about a woman who is at a she's at a college and she's working on I believe her dissertation. It's been a few months since I've seen it. I believe she's working on like her dissertation and it's about how she endures trauma. Like after she faces a trauma, it's how she navigates. It's one of the most sensitive and complex depictions of facing trauma and the ramifications of that and how you are affected and impacted by it that I've seen. It's wonderful. It's such a great film. So that one, yeah. Oh, and then I was gonna say the new the Frankenstein film, The Bride, but that got pushed back to next year, so I can't say that. Although I am excited for Guillermo del Toro's Frankenstein
Me
film.
too. I want to see both Frankensteins. Exactly.
Yeah,
I want
me
to see like
too.
both takes and kind of like go back and analyze and see which angles they use,
Yes.
like and which is better or were they both on the same level but different story. So I'm kind of excited for both of those as well.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I think those are the ones I'm most excited for.
Yeah. Lots of great things coming ahead. So Megan, what are you working on now? And just tell me your social media handles and all that stuff.
Sure. I'm working on going to start recording the second season of the Slashers podcast, which is a limited series podcast about the golden age of slashers, the 1980s, which is a lot of fun. Um, just did a review of On Swift Horses. So that was exciting. And yeah, and I do Spoiler Piece Theater every single week where we review new films. And I'll be on Women in Session next month too. So that's exciting. I'm always excited and talking more about fashion, which is, I feel like I don't ever get to talk about fashion and film. And it's something I love. So that's fun. And yeah, and my social media handles are Opinioness World on Blue Sky and Twitter, and The Opinioness on Instagram and Letterboxd.
Megan, thank you so much for talking about Twilight with me. This was an awesome episode. I just had so much fun.
My God, I had so much fun too, Jalen. Thank you so much for having me on. I can't believe it's already over. This was such a great conversation.
Right? We have to do it again. Stay tuned for
Yes.
more of Megan and Joyland talking about movies, babies. Yes, yes, yes.